Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. This time from Holland with Tulips, with this Tulip PC Compact 2. Now I got this computer from a friend who lives in Holland, and it is quite a beauty. I mean the PC, obviously. One might say they have gone overboard with the Tulip branding, but that's Dutch pride for you. It even comes with a matching Tulip keyboard, which is really nice. I don't have the mouse to go with it. I don't even know if it was sold with a mouse initially. Now this is an XT class computer from the end of the 80s with an NEC V20 CPU, just a tad faster than an 8088 or 8086. It comes with a green phosphor monochrome monitor, also from Tulip, which is nice. So yeah, it's kind of a low cost, low budget XT computer that was competing with lots of other clones back in the day. Basic I/O functionality, but room for expansion. Now, Tulip was founded in 1979 as CompuData, an importer of American microcomputers. In 1983, it launched its own PC, the Tulip PC. Now this one wasn't 100% compatible with IBM PCs, but it did run Microsoft DOS 2.0. For real IBM PC compatibility, we had to wait for the Tulip PC Compact, launched in '87. At the end of the 80s, it entered the highly competitive IBM PC clone market, where lots of competitors were there to score market share in the home and office environments. And this is when the Tulip PC Compact 2 was born, such as the one that I have here. And just look at those specs with the NEC V20 Intel 8088 compatible CPU running at up to 9.54 MHz, 640 kilobytes of RAM with zero wait state, high density floppy drive support, a clock, calendar, dual graphics adapter, XT compatible keyboard, CMOS memory for maintaining your settings, floppy controller with high density support for a universal mouse, Microsoft compatible, and some basic I/O. The base model had a dual graphics adapter, meaning that it could do monochrome text mode, Hercules mode, and CGA emulation mode. It also had the option for an advanced graphics adapter with EGA support. And hardware options included a reset switch, keyboard lock, Math Co-Pro, and a universal mouse. Now on the front there's not a whole lot going on except for a 3.5-inch high-density disk drive here with an LED which is kind of oddly placed. We have some LEDs on the front here and the Tulip PC Compact 2 logo. Moving to the back, we have the power switch, which is located here. We have a parallel port, power input, a huge fan, keyboard connector, mouse connector, 25-pin serial port. We have a monochrome display adapter connector and a second parallel port. And on the side, I just have to show you this big Tulip Computers logo again. Now, 4 screws are holding the top cover in place, so after removing them, the top cover can go off and we can get a sneak peek of the internals. So pretty classic arrangement. We only have 2 expansion cards, a video card which has this weird connector going to the main board, the MFM hard drive and matching controller card, a high density 3.5-inch disk drive, power supply unit sitting below the hard drive. And speaking of the hard drive, this is a Seagate ST125 20 megabyte MFM hard drive matched onto this Western Digital MFM controller card. Now the floppy drive is hooked up with this floppy cable to the main board directly, so there's no separate controller card. Now it's pretty rare to see these 3.5-inch MFM hard drives, and they aren't the most reliable ones. Now before turning on the computer, I brought in the help of my daughter who is fascinated with my multimeters to do a quick check on the 5 volt and the 12 volt rails just to make sure we don't have any shorts and unexpected explosions, and it all seemed to be fine. So time to flip the switch, hoping that nothing explodes, and we got something on the screen. Now what we got on the screen was not what I was expecting. I initially thought that the monitor might be bad, but with some fine-tuning using the back dials, we were able to get a clear picture. Now, because it seemed to lack an operating system, I decided to boot from an MS-DOS floppy disk. And judging from that sound, the floppy disk drive was alive and kicking. So booting into MS-DOS 3.3, I decided to load up fdisk, and I did found a hard drive partition, which is really good. That means that the hard drive is recognized and we should get a C prompt. But I was unable to get a directory listing off of the C drive. Instead, I got these seek errors and these terrible sounds coming from the hard drive. So that's not good. So I kept on trying and the situation wasn't really improving. Now, when starting, the hard drive didn't make any weird noises or sounds. It actually sounded pretty normal, so I was expecting this hard drive to kind of work. I mean, could this be the first Seagate 3.5-inch MFM hard drive that I see in complete working condition? Now, just to make sure that the hard drive was configured properly, I decided to boot with the Tulip PC diagnostic disks. Now, this is a disk that you need to configure the PC. So upon startup, it tells you that you do in fact have a Tulip PC Compact 2 and that there is an issue with the CMOS battery. Now, I'm sorry that this is in Dutch, but this is a Dutch computer. So in fact, I'm not going to apologize for it. So I'm just going to translate it to you. So here we set the real-time clock, the time and the date. So hopefully this should survive a warm reboot. We're going to set the disk drive. So pretty rare for computers from this era is that you can specify a high density 1.44 megabyte disk drive, which is really cool. Now you can configure the type of hard drive, but usually these types of computers are able to work with standard 20 megabyte hard drives. We have 640K of memory. We can set the CPU clock to 3 different modes. So we're running at the super high speed of 9 megahertz here. We set the video card. This one has a monochrome Hercules compatible card, which is called a DGA card. We have an extended keyboard. We don't have a CoPro, and we don't have a printer installed, but I'm just going to use the enhanced printer functionality. So upon setting all these parameters, we just need a quick reboot, and let's see if the computer will start. And it didn't, so we got rid of the time warning, but the PC was still not booting from the hard drive, so that was a bit of a bummer. Now, I did load up the diagnostic disk one more time because I wanted to go through the menu here, which was not possible the first time. So here we have some system information, BIOS versions, mainboard system ID and stuff like that. Nothing particularly interesting. There is a transport section here with an option to lock the hard drive heads for transportation. Upon doing that, I was completely stuck here, so I had to reboot the computer again. And another feature of this diagnostic disk is that you can run tests on the various components in this PC. So let's just go ahead and test everything and see what we come up with. So first is the memory test, the full 640K of it. This is fast forwarded because it actually took a couple of minutes. We have the video card test to test both text and graphic mode. So this is obviously some kind of Hercules compatible card. We can test the keyboard if all the function keys and the keys are working. We can test the CMOS clock. Now there's no battery here, but we did enter some CMOS parameters, so that's good. We can test the disk drive. Now the disk drive seems to be working fine, but at the end of this disk test, after doing a seek test and a read test, it did throw a controller error, which was pretty odd. Next up was the hard drive test. I was expecting lots of errors here, But the seek test went fine, the random verifier went okay, but then all of a sudden we got an error. And the error was that it had difficulties moving to a particular track. COM port, serial ports were all okay, and we can even do a speaker test using the diagnostic disc. So glad to know that the speaker works fine. So with the system properly configured, I attempted to format the drive using the format C command. Now, I am pretty sure that all the data will be destroyed and that I want to continue, but upon hitting enter on head number 1 and cylinder 0, I immediately got a format failure. So that's not good. So then I went into fdisk and I tried to remove the primary partition which was already present on the hard drive so that I could just recreate it somehow, hoping that that would fix something. But it didn't, because after deleting the first partition, which went fine, I was unable to create a new primary partition. The thing just got stuck here where normally it's calculating the maximum size for the DOS partition and prompting you to create a partition, but it didn't, so it got stuck here forever. So that's not good. So then I decided to remove the hard drive from this PC. I had pretty much given up on it at this point. I was thinking about replacing it with an XT IDE or some kind of other compatible hard drive, but I mean, I don't have any other MFM hard drives which are 3.5 inch that would be compatible with this PC. I cannot insert an IDE hard drive, I think, because I don't have any 8-bit IDE controller cards. So I thought that this drive was pretty much dead. But as I was disconnecting it and I was having a closer look at it, I hooked it back on, and wouldn't you know it, I got a directory listing. But I also got to seek errors again, but the situation was kind of improving because it was able to read something from that hard drive. So I wasn't really sure what was going on here. So when I was trying to look at what the autoexec.bat contained, it again threw me off with a seek error. But then I remembered what an old wise man once taught me, that if you take a screwdriver and you kind of hit the thing on the side, then it comes back to life again. And lo and behold, I mean, I was able to read the content of the autoexec.bat after that. Now, obviously, this is not the most healthy way to go about your hard drive business, but in this case, it kind of worked. So the same thing with the config.sys. Let's see if we can read that. Seek error. Let's give it a little hit. Retry. Retry. And here we have it. Now I still couldn't get a complete directory listing from the drive, so I decided that it would be more healthy just to do a low-level format. Now, because this is a Western Digital MFM controller card, we can load up the debug command in MS-DOS and enter this command to load up the low-level format menu, which is embedded in this Western Digital controller card. So here I'm just going to format the C drive using an interleave set to 3, and it will do the low-level format. Here you also have the option to format bad tracks. So you need to specify the track cylinders and the track heads which are bad. Now I don't know which cylinders and heads are bad, so I'm not going to be doing that here. So just hit no. Format was successful, and now we can restart the system, recreate a partition. So hopefully the primary partition will work now. So let's hit yes. And we get the option to restart, which is good. So here the primary partition was created, so now we can go ahead and do the format. So again, we are sure that we want to format. Hit enter, and it is already past cylinder 1, which is good. So it keeps chugging along. It doesn't seem to have any issues, so We're already at cylinder 35, so that's really good. But then when you hit cylinder 43, things start to get worse again. So we can hear the hard drive making non-normal sound. We can see that the format takes a very long time to go through all of these cylinders on the different heads. And it takes about up to cylinder 47 before this hard drive will continue again. So here we're stuck at cylinder 45. It is continuing, but it takes a very long time. So something is definitely up here. And remember that we had the option to enter bad cylinders and bad heads. So take that into account. So it started at cylinder 43. And once we get past cylinder 47, it seems to be working fine again. So let's hope it will make it all the way to cylinder 640 or 614. But it gets stuck at 74 now. Same thing for 75, so that's not good. And then we get an error after cylinder 76 that we have a format failure. So how do we fix that? Well, remember here that we can have the option to format bad tracks during a low-level format. Let's go ahead and do that. So I have noted the bad cylinders and heads while I was doing the initial format. And you might remember that things got bad right about cylinder 43. So I'm going to be entering cylinder 43 and all of the 4 heads all the way up to 47. But I get onto the end of the line here. So I need to hit enter here, press yes for more, and then continue with my little list. I also noticed that upon cylinder 73 there were some issues, so I'm going to be entering those as well up to cylinder 76. And then we get a nice listing here of user supplied issues. And now we can do the format, the MS-DOS format again, and notice how it again sees the issues right about cylinder 43, but it gets past them a lot quicker than before. It still makes kind of a non-normal sound, but it's not quite as worse as before, and it's actually a lot faster now. It is still slower than the good cylinders, but because the low-level format has marked these cylinders as bad, the MS-DOS format will simply format them, mark them as bad, but it will not do as many retries as before. And look at this, I mean, it is continuing now all the way up to the last cylinder, which I think is going to be cylinder 614. Or 13. And there you have it. The format has completed. We don't have a format failure. We do have certain bytes which are unavailable. That's because we have marked them as bad. But now we can transfer the system to the hard drive. We can copy the command.com onto the hard drive, something you needed to do with older versions of MS-DOS. But after that, we should be able to reboot the system now, and it should boot off a hard drive. And indeed it does. We get the date prompt, the time prompt, and the C prompt. So let's do a directory listing. We have the command.com, which completes successfully. Excellent. All we need to do now to have a complete MS-DOS setup is to copy all of the files which are on the single MS-DOS 3.3 floppy drive onto the hard drive, and we're all set. Now, this computer originally came with MS-DOS 3.3, but also with Microsoft Windows 1.0.3, and I just happen to have the Tulip specific Microsoft Windows installation disks here. So this is a 3-set disk, so let's start with the first one. We are indeed ready to install Microsoft Windows in the Windows folder, so let's click V to continue. Obviously, this is a Dutch version because this is the version that came bundled with this Tulip PC. So we need to select the type of keyboard that we have. So this is a Dutch computer, so let's click the Netherlands. We don't have a mouse, unfortunately, so no pointing device here. So we'll need to use those keyboard shortcuts. We have a Hercules graphics card or compatible with a monochrome display. So let's hit number 5. And we're off to the races. So it will start copying files from the first disk, and after a while it will prompt for the second disk. where it will begin continue copying files to the hard drive. So it's pretty amazing that an entire Windows was able to fit into 3 floppy disks. And we're finally reaching the end of the installation. So hitting Win and Enter gives us this beautiful Microsoft splash screen. And here we have it, Windows 1.03. And this included a calendar. A calculator. A control panel to customize all kinds of cool stuff. Notepad, which is still bundled with Windows even today. A digital analog clock. Microsoft Paint. Microsoft Write for those who have outgrown Notepad. So really cool to see this old version of Microsoft Windows running on this Tulip PC. So I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of this video. Please stay tuned for part 2, which should drop relatively soon, where we will go into the internals of the PC, see what kind of hardware we have, look at the various expansion cards that go with it, and get a more in-depth hardware view of the computer. So in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, or commenting, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.